In the dark and mysterious waters of Vortex Spring, a mystery that has baffled investigators and divers for more than a decade lurks beneath the surface. A world where a daring diver ventured into the unknown and never returned. A world where no clues or traces were left behind to explain his fate. This is the story that has perplexed and captivated not only divers but the general public for over a decade. This is the story of Ben McDaniel, the man who vanished. But first, who was Ben McDaniel? Ben McDaniel was born on April 15, 1980 to Shelby and Patty McDaniel as their first son. His parents enjoyed substantial wealth and belonged to Memphis, Tennessee in the U.S. This American diver was the oldest of the four sons of the couple, his siblings being Paul, Tim, and Brad. And out of them, Paul was the one Ben shared the strongest bond with. McDaniel had a fervent interest in scuba diving, and it was this passion he had initiated at the age of 15. Not only had he received certifications for open water dives, but also he was working to get certified as a cave diver as well. Ben was also a rock climber enthusiast too, along with his younger brother Paul. Despite the fact that Ben's parents were very affluent and abundant in wealth, Ben was having an exact opposite experience. In the late 2000s, he was grappling with a really difficult and rough period in the timeline of his life. His inauspicious fate began when he lost his younger brother Paul, who was just 22 years old. He was a frequent rock climbing partner of McDaniel in their amazing growth years. Despite the age difference, the duo was very close and paid regular visits to each other to spend quality time together. Tragically, the person who found Paul unconscious in the family home was Ben himself. He tried to wake him up, but to no avail. And a while later, when the paramedics arrived, Paul was pronounced dead on the scene due to an unfortunate stroke. Ben's parents put forward an initiative to help people with similar conditions by setting up a foundation. And Ben was actively participating in the initiative, but then, even more tragically, the news spread out that the family had hidden the truth about how actually their son died. He did not die of a stroke. But on the other hand, the thing that laid him to the deathbed was drug intoxication of benzos and opiates. This intoxication caused encephalopathy, which then led to Paul's death. This truth was revealed by Paul's medical examiner and his autopsy. Paul was prescribed Adderall, Seroquel, and Xanax, but the intake of opiates, which were not prescribed to him, caused his death. While Ben was mourning at his brother's death, misfortune attacked him once again, and he had to deal with a hard divorce at the same time. As if all this was not enough, due to the economic downturn in the late 2000s, his construction businesses started falling. Things got so worse that he became a debtor of $50,000 to the IRS and was forced to move back in with his parents. These few years were super challenging for Ben McDaniel that he reached the point of his life where he wanted to start a new life and achieve things that he wanted to. His parents offered him to go live in Florida at their beach house while he will be taking a sabbatical. He finally moved to Florida in 2009. Things seemed to be getting better with Ben when he moved to Florida. There, he was able to pursue his teenage passion that was scuba diving. He became obsessed with the sport since he had plenty of time to explore it while living at the beach house during his professional leave. Despite a lot of diving spots in Florida, one particular local spot caught Ben's eye. Although Ben was living right near the coast, he had a preference for diving in freshwater. There is an abundance of freshwater springs in Florida, but even among all these springs, Vortex Spring is sort of unique. Vortex Spring is perfect for any diver. It is not only the largest diving facility in Florida, but it boasts of water that is super clear and easy to swim through, and a temperature that is not cold enough to need equipment more advanced than a wetsuit. The upper portion of the spring is well used by beginner divers to develop their skill. And it even has a massive cave system, which is a fun challenge for any experienced diver. Calculating from the water's surface, the spring extends down to 60 feet, which opens up into the cavern that beginner divers use. That cavern goes for around 300 feet further and down to the depth of 115 feet. And that was where you'd find a steel rebar gate that blocks off entrance to the cave system that is reserved only for the most proficient of divers. The divers who wish to explore the cave, which is the deeper section of the Vortex Spring, need to show that they are cave certified to get the key to access this deeper section of this spring. The gate was installed in the 90s due to a certain reason. The state had threatened to ban the spring altogether if a certain measure was not taken to prevent the divers from going into the cave, because the number of deaths in the cave had exceeded to over a dozen. The reason that all of the divers were allured to discover the cave was very obvious and unambiguous. It was measured that the limestone passages were over 48 meters that extended to a depth of over 310 feet, and even deeper, but the narrow dimensions of the passage make it very difficult to access. Its limited size creates a solid hindrance to explore the cave further. Some passages are even measured to be just 10 inches wide, where oceanic experts may need to remove their gas tanks and engage in twisting and contorting movements to navigate through such confined space. After living with his parents for a few weeks in Tennessee, Ben McDaniel returned to the beach house, which was owned by his wealthy parents, located in Santa Rosa on 18th of August. The dive shop employees of the Vortex Spring had become quite familiar with Ben, as well as had the other divers who paid frequent visits to the spring. His truck was often seen in the parking lot while Ben was either at the waterside or was diving. He had also met a new girlfriend, Emily Greer, who shared his love for the ocean. Despite lacking proper certification, Ben was a regular at Vortex Spring. He had explored the cave at Vortex Spring several times, often without paying the entrance fee or signing the logbook. He had bought expensive equipment and had claimed to have reached depths of 300 feet. He had also drawn maps of the cave and expressed his desire to find a new passage that he believed existed beyond a narrow restriction. His unauthorized dives and hidden and secret ventures into the forbidden cave set the stage for a tragedy waiting to unfold. At around midday, he went to the Vortex Spring, marking his first dive for the day. During the dive, his fellow divers had noticed him taking a very close look at the entry portal of the cave, and his intense study of the gate suggested a planning phase, as if he was formulating a specific course of action. After a span of time, Ben was seen exiting the water as he surfaced, and then proceeding to refill his tanks in the dive shop of the Vortex Spring. He dedicated the remainder of his afternoon hanging around the shore, checking his gear and jotting down something in what appeared to be his dive logs. All these activities were captured by the security cameras installed inside the dive shop. The following evening was rather hot and sweltering, and Ben seemed to be preparing for another dive. The cave-certified divers who wanted to adventure and navigate the cave were required a permission to enter by the dive shop employees. The employees knew that Ben neither had the certificate nor the permission, but they had strong suspicions for a while now that Ben had been making his way into the cave unethically, as well as stealthily by forcing the gate open. On the night of the 18th of August, one of the dive shop employees decided to swim down with Ben and open the gate for him. Both of them passed the infamous sign of the Grim Reaper with something written in big, bold letters, the word "Stop," as they swam into the large cave at the bottom of the Vortex Spring. It was the single most recognizable sign in the diving world, with some true statistics about the number of divers who had been laid to the deathbed in the cave just below the word "Stop." This sign was definitely of no concern for Ben, as he had already stated that he wanted to explore the cave more, and he had been there a lot of times before too. The duo reached the steel gate after following the sign, and the employee opened the gate for Ben to squeeze his way under the overhanging limestone, giving him a sort of legal access to explore the cave. The employee decided to call it a night and went back to the shop instead of waiting around for Ben, like they sometimes did out of courtesy. Indeed, they were under no obligation to wait around for the diver. Sometimes they stayed to wait. Sometimes they did not. To the best of anyone's knowledge yet, this was the last time anyone had ever seen Ben. The employees claimed that Ben had entered the Vortex Spring cave at around 7:30 p.m. and did not come out by 9 p.m. when they closed the shop. They said they left a note on his truck asking him to check in with them when he returned. The next morning, his truck was found to be still parked at the same place in the parking lot. The parking lot was already quite crowded that day, and since everyone was preoccupied with their own tasks, his absence was largely unnoticed. Then, after 2 days, on Friday, people started noticing that his truck had been parked at the same spot for 2 days straight. Not only did the truck not move even an inch from where it was parked 2 days ago, but they also realized that they had not seen Ben around the spring or in the shop. It was at that point that they reached out to Ben McDaniel's parents, who lived somewhere near the Vortex Spring and called upon the police to launch an investigation into his disappearance. The initial search was conducted by the Holmes County Sheriff's Office, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office dive team. They found no evidence of Ben beyond the gate and concluded that he could not have entered the unexplored area due to his size and lack of experience. And this is where things also start to get oddly weird. The spring was sealed off by the cops to make sure no one was able to trespass without their knowledge. The search began. The police began searching the area of the spring as well as Ben's truck in hopes of uncovering clues and his belongings. Despite the thorough efforts, no trace of his tanks, his wetsuit, or any of his other equipment was found. They did find some of his belongings in the truck that included his wallet with $1,100 in cash, his dive logs, as well as his cell phone. Something really fascinating and useful was his logs, in which he had mapped the areas of the cave he had explored. Succeeding that, they visited his parents' beach house, which was his current residence, only to find his hungry dog inside. The dog appeared to have gone without food for at least 2 days, completely aligning with the time Ben was thought to have disappeared from. Given this information, the cops as well as the shop employees were quite inclined to believe that Ben was still in the cave, and it seemed like he had drowned. The search was continued by the introduction of cadaver dogs to search the area. The dogs were found consistently guiding police to the surface of water, which seemed to validate the belief that Ben had entered the cave and never came out. The news spread rapidly in the divers' community like a forest fire, and the cave divers of all levels volunteered to help search for Ben's body. The prevailing assumption was that the search would be focused on body recovery. At first, the police welcomed the considerable support, anticipating a considerable speedy rate of the search efforts. However, as more divers joined in, they began cautioning the police about the difficult challenges associated with the operation. The blend of depth, narrow tunnels, and silty conditions meant that if any mishap happened, it could potentially lead to the need of recovering 2 dead bodies instead of 1. Ultimately, the world's most experienced divers began searching the cave thoroughly, while Ben's parents and his girlfriend were often sitting at the side of Spring for any sign of Ben. The search in the first few days was all inclined towards large and small tunnels, and then they proceeded to turn their focus towards tiny crevices and fissures. But despite all the hard work and efforts, the only things they could find were 3 gas cylinders that were believed to be belonging to Ben. The strange fact was that all the 3 tanks contained regular air, while at least one of the tanks should have contained a special mixture of gas, different from ordinary air, because of the depth he was diving to. At such depths, a diver using regular air becomes vulnerable to nitrogen narcosis. Given Ben's experience evident from his dive log showing multiple entries into the cave, it is probable that he was aware of this risk. It's very close to impossible that he would have survived his past dives if he had such regular air in the tanks, like it was found in the search. Rescue efforts were nothing but genuinely confused by the discovery. It had been 4 days now by Sunday following Ben's disappearance. The legend, Ed Sorensen, who was a famous and well-respected cave diver and instructor, was contacted by someone from the search party. The instructor, upon receiving the message, was on a Bahamas expedition, yet immediately after he dropped everything and reached Florida the next day. When he reached, the other sea explorers and divers notified him that going beyond than they had already gone was way too life-threatening. Ed refused their assessment and proceeded on to make 3 separate dives for the search. Sorensen explored 1,700 feet of the cave, surpassing Ben's mapped distance by at least 200 feet. He even employed a dive propulsion vehicle to travel faster in smaller tanks to navigate tight spaces. Despite his thorough efforts, he discovered nothing. No body, no equipment, and even no signs of increased fish activity from fish that might have been feeding on something decaying somewhere in the cave. With each subsequent lead coming to a dead end, Ben's parents got more and more desperate. They were willing to try anything and everything for answers about what might have happened. First, they hired the man who originally mapped the cave to try to find him, but 7 dives later, all he was able to offer them was an apology for finding nothing. Next, they put up $50,000 as a deposit for the cost for replacing a remotely operated underwater vehicle. This vehicle was then used to search the cave, but unfortunately wasn't able to go any further than what the human divers had gone. When the search was finally winding down from the initial frenzy, 16 divers had spent 36 days straight, but turned up with nothing. With how throughout the search of the cave had been, it started to seem less likely that he was in there after all. His parents now firmly believed that if Ben wasn't in the cave, he was likely the victim of foul play. While all of this was going on, they had hired a private investigator to look into the dive shop and its employees. This investigator ended up finding out that several of the employees had criminal records, and that the owner was currently facing serious criminal charges. Around this time, various alternative theories began to emerge. Like, for example, if we think from another angle, perhaps his body was removed before the search was initiated. It is possible that he did drown, but out of concern that Spring might face consequences, even leading to a ban, other divers could have extracted him before his disappearance was even detected. Another theory suggested that Ben might have been washed out through one of the spring's outlets. However, when the police searched the swamps that were connected to the spring's outflows once more, they found no traces of him. Another theory which was put forth by several individuals was that Ben had maybe faked his own disappearance. It was mentioned that the stress of recent years might have driven him to seek a fresh start, away from the place where people knew him, thereby staging his vanishing act. However, the theory seems to make no sense since he was happy with his new girlfriend and was doing better as he continued living in Florida, moving on from his brother's death. He had even discussed his plans for a dive-related business with his girlfriend and had left a heartfelt letter for his parents before leaving for the beach house, expressing gratitude for their support and promising to take care of them in their old age. He knew what impact his brother's death had on his parents. It just didn't make any sense for him to disappear and leave them to grieve at his disappearance too. At least this was the perspective shared by Ben's parents and his girlfriend. All of these theories lead to a dead end as there is a lack of any solid evidence to prove them right. In the final exploration, before the search was called off, diving legend Jill Heinerth investigated Ben's disappearance. She wanted to create a short film for Ben's parents to provide them with some closure, but after delving into the details and exploring the cave herself, her opinion shifted. The short film evolved into a full-length documentary, and Jill now firmly believes that Ben is indeed somewhere inside the cave. Prior to this documentary, she was of the opinion that Ben wasn't in the cave, based on everything she knew. In the dark and mysterious waters of Vortex Spring, the enigma of Ben McDaniel's destiny remains unsolved. What occurred on that ill-fated dive that made him vanish without a trace? The reverberations of unanswered questions haunt the minds of those who seek the truth. Ben's story still remains shrouded in mystery. We still don't have a conclusive answer for what happened to him or his body. Despite things seeming to get better for him, he just disappeared. And despite the various rewards, his body was never found. But he will still be remembered, and hopefully in the future, divers will ensure to maintain proper safety standards and log all their dives as well as where they are going. So, what do you think would have happened to Ben? Was he murdered? Or was he a victim of any foul play? Did he go missing of his own will? Or did he get stuck in the cave of Vortex Spring forever? Hopefully one day this mystery gets solved and this tale gets the closure it so rightfully deserves. With that, I leave you. If you enjoyed this video, then I hope you'll consider leaving a like and subscribing for more content like this. And as always, thanks for watching.